Hey everyone. In this video, I'm going to try and give you a few pointers to help you succeed on the first midterm. The first thing that I'm going to do is go over some common mistakes that students in the past have made on the material from the first 4 weeks in the course. So the first one is, please make sure you understand the difference between a class and an object. And more importantly, when you're writing your own code, really try to think about the types of your objects. One of the most common mistakes that people make, not just on the midterm but in life, is getting the types of their variables wrong and therefore creating a huge mess of problems around, x has no attribute, move. The next common mistake is missing the difference between raising and handling exceptions. Remember that these two have very different purposes and use different syntax in Python. Don't confuse the two. Otherwise, you'll find yourself writing code that does something completely different than what is expected. Remember that when we talked about stacks, I said that there were only 4 things you could do with stacks. Use the constructor, call isEmpty, push, and pop. And that's because those 4 were the methods defined in our stack ADT. And so, for example, if I give you a stack ADT that does not have a length method, then you shouldn't be trying to call len on that stack. And as a side note, make sure you understand the difference between an abstract data type and an implementation of that abstract data type. In the first 4 weeks of lecture, we've seen a couple of differences between the two of these things. And finally, when it comes to linked lists, there's 2 common things that mess a lot of people up. The first is they simply don't understand how to do a basic traversal of the linked list. So setting some temporary variable to be self.first, and then using a loop to move that temporary variable along the nodes until you either reach the end of the list or you reach some specified point in the list and stop. I promise you that if you don't understand how to traverse a linked list using a while loop, you'll have a really hard time with every problem dealing with linked lists you'll see. And the second common mistake that people make when dealing with linked lists is that if you're actually changing the links, so if you're dealing with a mutating method, then the order in which you update the links matters a lot. We saw an example of this in lecture with insertion. Okay, so that's it for common mistakes. In terms of how you should study, there are 3 main things you should be doing. One is reviewing all of your notes from class and reviewing all your work from the labs and exercises. Later today, I'll try to post some links to past midterms. I recommend not only that you try doing a lot of practice questions, but that you even write 1 or 2 in a midterm-like format. Just block off 50 minutes of your time, print out a copy of that old midterm, print out a copy of the cheat sheet that I'm giving you, and start writing. And the third thing that you can be doing is just writing lots of code. So whether it's writing code that uses inheritance, writing code that uses exceptions, writing code that uses stacks, or writing code that uses linked lists. If you didn't manage to complete all of the exercises or all of the tasks in the labs, that's okay. That means that you have even more things that you can be practicing writing code for. And finally, here's a brief outline of what's going to be on the midterm. There's going to be 4 questions. The first question will be a series of short answer questions. They'll deal with the concepts that we learned in the first 4 weeks of the course. And so they'll involve little to no coding. It'll be perfectly fine to answer in point form. All of the remaining questions will be programming exercises. The second question will deal with some sort of class or some sort of ADT structure, whether it's an ADT you've seen before, like a stack or a queue, or maybe some sort of new ADT or class that I ask you to use in some way. And the final 2 questions will both deal with linked lists. Both of these questions will be very similar to things that you've seen before with linked lists, whether it's methods that we developed in class or methods and functions that you actually implemented yourself in either the lab or the exercise. And finally, the biggest tip of all that I can give you is start studying early. Don't wait until after you've handed in the assignment to begin your studying. It's much, much, much better for your learning to engage with the material consistently over multiple days than to try to cram all of your studying in to just one large chunk in one day. So please keep that in mind, and best of luck with your studying.